DME stands for distance measuring equipment. Now we already know what is measures from the word itself, right? Distance. But we'll see it is not the distance lateral or horizontal, it's the slant distance where it measures. And how does it measure? It uses the secondary radar system using the pulse technique. Pulse technique is something that all radars use, right? So it basically works like this. Sends out the signal, waits for it to come back, the aircraft then sends it off, and the receiver receives it. So this in turn is the interrogator. Okay, and this one would be the transponder. So just like we studied the last chapter, which was SSR, this is also the similar way. But in SSR, there was something unique. We had three different pulses, P1, P2, P3. And then between the P1 and P3, we had frames. Frames were 12. And then we have the SPI and all. But we'll see in this, there's a very, very simple structure. Other than the SSR, because it was really complex, because there were many, many modes and different aircrafts had different utilization of these modes. So we had to make it somewhat little complicated. But DME is very, very simple. We'll see how. The working is simple. We use the Pythagoras theorem to calculate the distance if we are asked in the exams. Otherwise, the simple method of calculating the instrument works on calculating the slant distance. Okay. As I told you in the previous slide, this is the DME station. It is also known as the interrogator. Okay. Just like in movies, this, okay, there is one interrogator. So just like in movies, this is the person who's trying to identify the aircraft, which is aircraft is. Okay. But in this case, we would not require the call sign, altitude, and all that. We just require the distance. But we need to know we need to distinguish the aircraft. All right. So we'll see how it does. But in simple terms, it is a application of your secondary radar. All right. The interrogator is on the aircraft and the transponder is on the ground. Okay. So just sorry, opposite. Interrogator is here. Whereas in this situation, it has been opposite. Why is that? Yeah, this is the DME. So what happens is the aircraft is the first person to transmit. I will see how. Okay, this is the DME. Sorry about that. What happens is the aircraft switches on the instrument, and because it is the one which requires the distance. Okay, it will not be the ATC tower which will be using mostly. DME will be used mostly by the aircraft. So sorry about that. So aircraft is sending out the signal initially, so it will be sending out the interrogator. That is why that is the place where you see. This video may be confused. Okay, the video states that the ground station is transmitting the frequency, whereas the aircraft is the one which we'll see actually does. Then this ground station will sense the signal and it will do a lock on, or it will apply a lock on. That means that it will connect with the aircraft and then continuously send the signals. So initially it is the aircraft which sends out the signal, not the ground station. All right. The frequency is ranging from 962 to 123. Now this is very, very peculiar. Why is this? Okay. Why is this a range? Just like we have a range in our VOR ILS, we also have a range in this. But you'll see, as in the secondary radar system, what we have is the signals which are sent and the signals which are received, both are on different frequencies. That is why we'll see a range of frequencies. Okay. The emission code is Papa 0 November. Okay. It is a secondary radar system operating between these two frequencies. Now you can see there is a small change in these two frequencies. Okay. But you'll see it's just plus 2 megahertz. Okay. There is no change bigger than that. It's plus 2 megahertz. We'll see what happens why. And this is, of course, in the UHF, that is ultra high frequency band. It provides 252 spots. How to calculate that? It's simple maths. You subtract 1213 from 962. You get what? You get around 252. Okay, because it includes the 3 also. Okay, it includes the 3 also. We'll do, if you want, you can also do. So it becomes around 252 only. We'll see how. Okay, we subtract 63 also from here, then we'll see the value we get. Why is that? So as I told you, in our aircraft and our receiver in the secondary radar, We have two different types of frequency which are sent in. What is the difference between these two frequencies? Let's say F1 and F2. It is plus minus 63 megahertz. Now, if we do the math right now, 1213 minus 962, how much you get? 1, 5, then you get 3. So this is already 1, 1. Yeah. So you get 251. And I told you it's plus 1. So 252. Okay. 252 is the number of spots available. But you need to realize that 962 will be paired with 63 is equal to how much? 1, 0, 1, oh sorry, 1025. This is the frequency it will be paired with. So this and this will be the combination. Now it depends, we'll add or subtract on the frequency we choose for transmitting. Suppose that the aircraft has transmitted on 962 megahertz. So what frequency it will be getting on? It will be getting at 1025 megahertz. That is how it works basically. It's a simple process, yet there is one thing it adds on. The channels are numbered 12126 X-ray, 12126 Yankee. Why is there an X-ray and Yankee? I'll just get to that. Now, if you see this table, okay, this table explains us why are there two bands. There are two different bands. One is known as low band. The second is high band. If we add the frequency, it is known as high band. Okay. If we add the frequency, which is sending out and coming back again. So you can see the examples are from these two. Okay. Whereas if you subtract the frequency, we're getting this. Okay, that is the main primary change or the difference. Subtracting will give us the low band, addition will give you the high band. When you add something, it becomes higher. You can always remember like that. The other thing which is important is there is an interval of 36 microseconds in this, whereas high band has 12 microsecond interval. You remember I told you there is something called restoration time or RT, right? That is the interval we're talking about here. And we'll see how we can use that to identify the aircraft also. Okay. So up till now, we are having these two values. All right. So we're transmitting, we're receiving, but the receiving part will depend on the band, the low band or the high band. Okay. So we already know that ILS has one part, it had three components. One was your localizer, glide path, and then finally we had marker beacons. That's the same thing. Okay, so the application of DME is used in the ILS as well. DME is also frequency paired with the ILS localizer and is obtained selecting ILS. So not only the marker beacons, you also find that localizer also has co-location with the DME. Okay, so if we have the localizer like this, separate bands, if the localizer is present and the DME is nearby, okay, DME station is nearby, so we can co-locate these two and we can use, but in this we will use what? We will use ILS DME whenever we're speaking out. So whenever the ATC tower asks you and you are following the ILS DME, you'll tell the ATC tower that you're using the ILS DME. Can anyone tell me why? Because, okay, I'm just saying that we have a DME that is co-located with your ILS. Okay. Now, whenever we are reading back to the ATC or when the ATC asks us what is your DME, okay, whenever they ask you. So if you're looking at your screen, you can tell them what DME you are at. But when you're using your ILS DME, then why do you have to specify that you're using the ILS DME? Correct. But can't I say 25 nautical mile inbound? Why can't I just say that? Why do I have to say 25 nautical mile inbound?
Mentioning ILS DME reduces workload of ATC officers.
No. It's not that. You need to understand when I am co-locating the ILS DME, ILS is always reference to the ILS reference point. That is the threshold. At threshold, ILS DME will read 0. Whereas normally VOR DME and other DMEs which are present on the station, they would be present somewhere else. And that will read the 0 value at that place. Okay. Suppose VOR DME will read you 0 at your VOR. It will not read 0 at your threshold. And that is why there's a slight difference between those two. And that is used to maintain the correct separation. Okay. So that is why it is important for you to realize right now that different DMEs co-located with others can also be used. Okay. The range information is 0 reference to the ILS runway threshold, as I told you. It's important. I've underlined it also in the notes. You can find it. So what is the use of DME other? You can see that we can use it, and this will be the written. Okay, this is how it is written on your. Okay, no problem. So we can see we have off, N1, hold, N2, not required for you to know all these. Okay, this is the part where I would like to focus. Okay, this is where you can see nautical mile, the distance is given. It uses DME is used to calculate the slant range, permits the aircraft for holding patterns, and DME, of course, if you're holding over a station, okay, you can easily use the DME. Provides range, height checks, and flying for non-aviation. We saw that we can ask the VOR DME to be co-located. Whenever the DME is co-located, you can easily identify what distance you are from the runway. Indicates accurate ranges of the runway threshold with ILS. Okay. Facilitates radar identification when the pilot reports his VOR DME position. Now, when we know the bearing and your distance, the ATC tower, which is seeing you on his or her screen, they can easily identify you. If you're saying I am at 180.25 nautical mile, that means that this is my VOR, you would be somewhere here. Okay, 25 nautical mile. So this is where they'll look on the screen and they will identify it's you. Okay. Lastly, it can also be combined together with area navigation system, that is a GPS. So it is autopilot and all. So you can select with autopilots and combine with that. So there are a lot of uses of DME. That is why it was installed, or it was invented around 1990s and all, and still being used till date. Let's discuss the principle of operation, and we'll realize what basically is happening. Okay. DME is a secondary radar system, of course. The aircraft's interrogator transmits a stream of omnidirectional pulses. So as I told you, first the aircraft itself becomes the interrogator. It transmits in all the directions. Okay, wherever the DME is present, okay, that DME will get the signal. The DME, if gets the signal, it will copy that signal and add or subtract the 63 megahertz frequency and send it back. Because why does the DME copy the signal? Because every aircraft has his or own jittered signal. You can say jittered. Jittered basically means there's a slight change in the pulse or pulse per second, pulse pair per second. Let's say. Okay, so there is a slight change in the pulse pair, and we'll see how that change goes. And that change is copied by the DME and given back. Now, when it's given back to the aircraft, it quickly calculates the time and it gets the distance. Okay, so you can see simultaneously the interrogator's receiver starts the range search. At the transponder on the ground, the received interrogation pulses are retransmitted after a delay of 50 microseconds at a frequency that is plus minus 63 megahertz removed from the interrogation frequency. We know the speed of radio waves, so we can calculate the distance from this. In theory, up to 100 aircrafts can integrate a DME transponder. So only 100 particular aircrafts can actually use one DME station at a time, and we will cross-check this point. We will see how this point is valid. Okay, so this is the basics of it. Let's see how individual aircrafts are identified. So what is the process? First, you tune to the frequency. So tune. When you tune the frequency of the DME, Where you'll find the DME frequency? You'll find it in the Jepson charts, approach charts, airport authority charts. All right. Once you tune in the frequency, your aircraft will transfer the signal all around. Okay. The aircraft transmits the signal all around wherever possible. Now you can see the pulse pair groups are jittered, and this jittering or this change is a slight difference, okay, between all the aircrafts in the world. Now this slight difference is in the pulse pair groups. Okay, that could be changed whenever you want. It's dependent on the aircraft. Okay, once it sends out the signal with this jittered frequency, the DME on board detects it. Okay, and then sends out the same signal, just plus minus 63 megahertz according to the band. Okay, at the same random spacing. This random spacing is the keyword, and that is how different aircrafts are identified. Why do we need the different aircraft? Because every aircraft will have its own distance. You can't ask the other to follow you. And finally, by this method, the aircraft will again receive the frequency. Okay, when the aircraft receives that frequency from the ground station, it can quickly calculate the time. Okay, it has the time, it can calculate the distance. Once it calculates a distance, that distance is shown onto your screen. Okay, and that is how it works. Let's go into a little more depth about this pulse pair groups. What is this? Okay, so you can see individual pulses are like this. Okay, these are pulses which I've already explained in the before chapter of radars. The pulses have some time between them. Okay, now these pulses are paired together. These are pair of pulses, you can see. Now these pulses pair have a little gap. Now this gap, what happens is there is an interval. What the gap is, it's an interval. It could be different, or it could be random. For each aircraft, it's random. Okay, it's programmed to transmit the paired pulses at random intervals, which is also known as irregular or jittered. Okay. At an instant of the transmission, the receiver of an interrogator sets up the gauge to match the twin pulses. So, as I explained in the previous slide also, the aircraft sends out a signal. Now, this signal is already having random pulse pairs. What it does is, after it has sent the signal, it waits. It opens the gate for the same signal to come back, just the frequency could be changed. It does not care the frequency being changed. It just cares so that its signals come back. So when it does that, it is waiting, and whenever the same random pulse pair returns back with plus minus 63 megahertz, it can, okay, whenever it returns back, it accepts it. And it accepts it, and it quickly calculates the time and the distance, and it shows you on the screen. The responses on the transponder's carrier frequency include an individual's aircraft's paired pulses plus those of from the other aircraft. Okay. The receiving equipment of an aircraft is designed so that only the responses which match its random PRF are allowed through the gate, achieving a lock on. Now I've already told you when the ground station will transmit, it will receive, and this will lock on to them. That means when it's locked on, okay, when the lock on is achieved, then the aircraft knows that, yeah, this is my DME I have to focus on, and the DME also knows that this is the aircraft I have to focus on. And then they keep on exchanging the exchanging the radio waves. But there's a catch in this. We already just discussed that this DME only can take 100 aircrafts at a time. So how does that DME selects which aircraft to take or not? Okay. First of all, let's see why only 100. Why only 100 aircrafts? Okay, this is the diagram. You can see I've already told you this. With this diagram also, you can clarify your doubts if you have any. Okay, this is the aircraft sending out the signal. There's a pulse interval. This pulse pair interval is jittered. We don't know how much it is. It could be less, it could be more. It depends on the aircraft to aircraft. And the reply is also, you can see the same. Okay, the same way, just the frequency is changed. So as we know that the DME is also limited, and DME is also carrying out a range search. Okay, now the range search, to achieve a rapid lock on during the range search, the DME interrogator transmits at this. Okay, of course the aircraft is transmitting. Okay, the aircraft is transmitting, I get that, but the DME present on the ground, it will also send the signal back. But in which direction? How does it know the aircraft is present in this only direction? So it will also send out the signal. Okay, now the DME is also sending a signal. This is known as range search. Okay, that will transmit at 150 pulses pair per second for this much speed. Okay, so range search is done with the help of the, it depends on the interrogator. So if the aircraft is the interrogator, that will do the range search. If the DME is the interrogator, that will do the range search. Range search basically means they don't know where is the DME, where is the aircraft. They will just send out the signal everywhere. Now we know there is a limitation. Of course, there's a limitation. So it sends out 150 pulse pairs per seconds. Okay. How many pulse pairs do we have in 100 seconds? We have this many. So into 100, okay, we will get 15000, that is 15,000 PPPS. You can see this happens. Okay. Now, if a lock on is not achieved within this period, it gets tired and it reduces its PPPS. That is just, it becomes 60 BPS. Okay, because it did not receive its lock on. Okay, whenever it will receive again the signal, then it will again do a range search. But if it the 100-second period it does not, then it stops. It reduces it to 60 BPS. But in case if it does receive a lock on, it starts to transmit at 27 PPS, because now it knows where the aircraft is. It will start to transmit with a less pulse pairs per second. So it wastes less energy. And now you can see we are getting to the point. It takes 4 to 5 seconds in modern equipment to do the range search. Okay. And now we'll get to peak situation. Just we realized right now that it occurs at 2700 pulse per seconds. Okay. 2700 pulse pair per second is what? It's the saturation of the beacon or the DME. This is the highest limit it can reach. So we just realized that the aircraft is sending out the signals at this, right? 25 to 230. So let's take an average. We'll take 27 PPPS, pulse per second. Pulse pair per second or pulse pairs. This is the amount of thing. Now we have is the limitation is 2700. Okay, so 27 into 100. Okay, every aircraft is sending out at 27. The DME only has a saturation limit of 2700. So it can only get 100 aircrafts, and that is the reason there is a limit to 100 aircrafts. Okay. So you can see in this example, the only green dots which are able to receive the signal. Other than that, they are far away. They can't even get to the signals. They can't get the signal because of the beacon saturation. It's not because of the range, it is because of the beacon saturation. Now, who is to decide which aircraft to take? Simple logic. Whichever has the strongest signals, those are the ones the aircraft will start to target. Okay. Let's come to station identification. There's a 3-letter call sign that is for transmitted every 30 seconds, so that the aircraft also knows, yeah, that is Delhi, that is whatever they're using the DM. Okay. The range information is not available during the ident period. However, the aircraft equipment has 10-second memory circuit to continue displaying the range of data. Okay. What is ident? Ident is the identification. Okay. Whenever the aircraft, okay, whenever the aircraft or the DME, okay, aircraft in the sense is doing an identification, the transmission or the goes off. Okay, the range information goes off. But because the aircraft has a 10 seconds this period, okay, memory period, it has a device inside it, so it must be having a memory. That memory is used for 10 seconds. So it will save that information and will keep the information as the range. Okay, you can see if in case you use the charts, how the DME looks like. The DME is looking like this, the inside part. If you see in the bigger picture also, DOR is this, DME is like a rectangle. Okay. If we include into any nav aid, you see this is my BOR. If I include my DME, it's just a square added. Okay. If you see your NDB or ADF, okay, NDB looks like this. If we add your NDB with a DME, it will add a square. Okay. So in this case, you can see where DME co-located. Okay. DME is co-located and the call sign of the station identification is a 3-letter word. Okay. Range and coverage, as we know, DME is only primarily used as line of sight. So line of sight becomes the range. Then we have the DOC. DOC also is defined for all the radio aids. Okay. Finally, we have the echo protection circuit. This is important. What is this? It is used in the order to eliminate errors arising from the reflection from the Earth's surface, buildings, mountains, terrain. The aircraft receiver incorporates it. Okay. Basically, if you can see, if there's a building, the signal will still go to the aircraft, but this will be a little different. Okay. So there's an echo protection circuit that is placed, just like a sight error, it is removed. Now, how it works, it's as a different issue. It's just that you should realize in the DME, we have an echo protection circuit as well. Finally, system accuracy. What does the accuracy depend on? Based on 95% probability, the system accuracy for DME used for navigation should give a total system error not exceeding of this limit. So we cannot exceed this limit, just like we had in the previous examples of your automatic monitoring, ground monitoring in ILS and BOR. DME is also very sensitive and many operations depend on it. So it also has a accuracy rate. It should not be less than this. Precision systems are accurate to plus minus 100 feet on final approach. What does this mean? If I am having an ILS system that is a precision approach, these should values be present. The difference between competitive and slant range when actual ground distance becomes significant when the aircraft is at a range which is less than 3 times the height. What this basically means is there is the difference between the slant range, this is my slant range, okay, and the actual ground distance. So this is my distance, okay, becomes significant when the aircraft is at a range which is less than 3 times the height. So this is my height. What it's saying is, suppose that aircraft is flying at 30,000 feet, okay, very, very high, 30,000 feet. In that scenario, the slant range and the ground distance can be assumed equal. Okay, can be said that they are equal. That is why it does not matter to us that we speak the slant range itself. Okay, but when the height gets less than 3 times, okay, when the aircraft is at a range which is less than 3 times the height, so this is the range. Okay, range is less than 3 times the height. Okay, then the matter is different. Then we have to realize that the slant range and the ground distance are unequal, not equal. Okay. Anyways, this is something not required, but of course, easy say we don't know because they can ask. I'll just introduce you to something which is not your civil aviation requirements, but of course your military. Okay, the military nav aid uses the DME station to provide ranges also. Of course, they will also use the facility, but this facility cannot be used by civilian. Its DME station can be used by the civilian aircrafts, which is that tactical air navigation. Remember, if I show you, we have this TACAN. Okay, TACAN is basically used by the military. You can't use that. It provides the bearing and it is very accurate actually. But the DME part of this TACAN, you can use the DME part. Okay, that's what it's trying to say. So if in an exam it is asked, can you use the DME of a TACAN? Yes, you can. As a civilian, you can. What are the different advantages of DME? There is no interference due to weather, as reflection from clouds are on the same frequency as transmission. So your aircraft is waiting for another frequency to come, right? So if it receives the same frequency as transmitted, then it will not accept it only. Okay. Transmission power is less required as travel is not there. This is the advantage of what? Secondary radars. Basically, all these advantages are secondary radars. Self-tracking, just like this, self-tracking does not take place. Okay, these three were the advantages. We just go through the summary before we end this chapter. You'll find the summary also in the notes. Okay, this is the UHF band. 252 are the channels. You can see plus minus 63 megahertz is the difference. DME paired with ILS gives the range 0 only at the ILS runway threshold. That is why you have to specify that. What are the uses? Circular position line, ground speed, time to distance, DME arcs, okay, range height checks, accurate ranges, and RNAV, which is your autopilot also. Okay, principle of operation. The aircraft is the interrogator in this. Transmits pair of pulses at random intervals known as jittering. Okay, jittering. And that is the omnidirection. The ground station is a transponder in this. It retransmits all the pulses at plus minus 63 megahertz with a delay of 50 microseconds. It's just microseconds. Okay. Aircraft receiver identifies own pulses, determines the range from the time interval between the transmitted and received, minus the obvious gap. Okay, it also subtracts this gap. Okay, the pulse characteristics. What are the pulse are in these? There are twin pulses. We remember it's a pair. That is why we have PPPS, not PPS. Okay, we have a PPPS. That is a pulse pair per second. Jittered pulses are used to identify own pulses. Frequency change prevents aircraft locking to reflections. These are the pulse rates. So initially we are having 150 ppps, then it reduces to 60 if no lock on. Okay, if no lock on. Further reduced to about 25 ppps at lock on. Beacon saturation is 2700 ppps. That means that 2700 divided by 27 gives us 100 aircrafts. Chain identification, 3-letter code, BORDME pairing associated with this. These are not required. Okay. Yeah, this is important. If serving same location, then call sign of DME third letter is Z or Zulu. Okay. Separation. If 6 nautical mile apart, then the call sign is separate. And remember in BORDME, okay, we had the co-location and it was just, I think it was 150 or 60 meters. Okay. But in this case, if we are in 2 DMEs, then the separation could be this. Coverage, we saw that the range is calculated on the basis of LOS, which is a line of sight. Okay, reduced by interviewing high ground beacon, that's not required. Echo protection circuit eliminates the reflections. Important, very, very important. Then we discussed what is the accuracy, plus minus 25 nautical mile. These are the important part. Okay. Slant range error significant when the aircraft is the range is less than 3 times the height. Okay. Just an example. Suppose the height is 100 feet. So if the range is, let's say, 200 feet, okay, so the range is less than 3 times the height in this example. So there will be a slant error. Okay, slant range error. Ground speed error increases as the aircraft goes higher and closer to station. Of course, this is not important, but of course it is present.